Fellas, how are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey,
Good.
good. How are you doing?
Been good. How's 661 going, Tyler?
It's good. We had our meeting. I guess it was last week. Yeah, it's been going good. It's going to be a lot of reading
Yeah.
for both courses, but
Which
Todd,
one
was,
was that one again?
I think that was was that the first one we took, Todd?
I can't remember. What's the main focus of it?
school technology leadership.
Yeah, I think that was.
So
Okay.
I don't know if you do the same readings. We're reading open leadership and developing like a school tech plan. It's the
Yeah,
ultimate culmination of
Charlene
it.
Lee.
Yeah, that actually is a really good book. I like
That's
that
a
one
great
a lot.
book.
Yeah, I mean it's not an education book,
Yeah,
but
That's
yeah,
probably actually interesting in light of this Fullan book because that's all business focused, and I think Fullan does a good job of connecting business ideas with education ideas.
hmm
But yeah,
oh, really? I need to get into it this week, I guess.
yeah. Actually, I used that book. Our organization was doing some technology leadership stuff internally, and I photocopied some chapters out of that book and used. It was really helpful. All right.
all right.
So speaking of Fullan,
Speaking
I
of
guess
Fullan, yeah, it's a really good book. Todd, before we started recording, you had mentioned that it's a very practical book, but also it's based on a lot of research. I would absolutely agree with that. And Mr. Watts, thank you very much for the work you put into the doc already. I think that's our framework for the two-page handout that we give out.
yep,
Okay,
totally
great.
agree. Had you guys come across Fullan at all before?
Yes, I have. I can't remember what was like the big one that he had published through ASCD. That's probably the one that I know the most, but not enough where I can remember the title of the book.
Is that the change
I don't
leader?
know.
Probably. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, one of my colleagues at work is a PhD in ed leadership, and we kept talking about the leadership courses I was taking, and she kept asking me when I was going to read Fullan, when I was going to read Fullan. I was like, I don't know. We haven't come across Fullan at all, so that's why I signed up for. I guess I think there were 3 options for Fullan in the readings. I put all 3 of those first, just because I felt like I was going to be guilted into reading it regardless, so I might as well do it for class. But no, I was impressed. I like him.
I was pleasantly surprised. I don't know if you guys know my background. My master's is in business,
Oh, yeah.
kind of by virtue of being in Vietnam and having the opportunity to study business in Vietnam. So it was nice to have that business and education analogies and examples because everything seemed perfect for the things that I'm exploring, I guess.
And I can't remember the quote. Where was it in the book? It said something about business needs to be more emotional and education needs to be more intelligent, something like that.
Yeah,
Spirit and the mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was fairly accurate. I mean, I've never really worked. Well, I did. I mean, I worked in the business world a little bit when I was in college. I worked for Gateway 2000 back when it was before 2000, selling computers and computer parts and all that kind of thing.
yeah.
It was really interesting.
Yeah, for me, the entire process of reading this book was interesting for me. Kurt, for about a week, I was really struggling with the possibility of going to a school district and working in a central office position.
Mm-hmm.
So during that time, I was reading this book in light of that potential job and what that would look like as a central office administrator. And then when I finally, after a week and a half of struggling back and forth, decided I'm going to stay where we are, then I started looking at from within our own organization, like things we need to change internally and how we go about making those changes. So, yeah, it was interesting for me because I was able to look at this book, one, from kind of a pseudo business, which is what my organization is now, And then the rest of the time I was looking at it from actual school perspective. So it hit home on two different fronts for me, which is interesting.
So you're happy to stay put in your current position then?
Yeah, I think with the PhD still going on, and it's probably not the best time. Although it was a really cool job, and I was really interested in working at the place where I was looking. But in the end, it's just not the right time.
Yeah, I know you said it was a really good school district, and you were torn with your employer that you enjoy, and
yeah, it was a tough call.
Yeah, that's nice.
But it made this book all that much more relevant because, I mean, both organizations would have been change organizations. Our organization where I'm at right now is really thinking about redoing the way we do things. And part of my staying was taking more of a role in policy also, and that's, of course, change focused. So that's yeah, it's all kind of an interesting convergence.
Yeah.
In fact, I was emailing my boss quotes from the book a couple days ago as I was going through, like, hey, we should really think this way, just because it made a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like this book came out in 2009. When was it? No, 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. Because a lot of the stuff that's so many things going on in my school district right now. I mean, this is like extremely relevant. And just the political reality of education in Wisconsin has changed so much since 2010 and 2011 when a lot of things happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so Michael Fullan, hats off to you. All right, so Watts, you came up with a nice draft. I'd say it's more than a draft.
Yeah.
A very polished draft of a handout already. And I see that you've included the graphics conceptual framework. What would that be?
Yeah, I guess it would be his kind of framework.
Yeah. No, it is a framework. It's got a title. It's called a framework for leadership. Yeah, I think that's pretty
And everything is basically a expansion on that, I would say. Probably just really digging into what those mean, because it's not a very self-explanatory framework, or at least, I guess, there's lots of things that can go into each of those based on the chapter.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, I think that maybe the natural organization for the handout would just be each chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. Moral purpose. It didn't seem like there was a lot of... I mean, it wasn't real deep about moral purpose, but I think he explained it pretty well. I mean, it's his concept, so of course he explained it well, but I mean, it wouldn't take a lot of work to help other people understand what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second chapter, thank you, Tyler, for the handout. It looks great. Just understanding change, I think that's essential for leadership, just to know what change is. And I like how Fullan explained it, that there is no perfect 7-step or 8-step recipe, that it isn't a checklist kind of thing. It's a process that you should understand. Go ahead, Todd.
No, I was going to say I totally agree with that, and I love the fact that he mentioned that. But as I was reading that chapter, and even the chapters after, the amount of lists that emerged, that just made me think more about every time he would rattle off a list of things. And it was pretty frequent throughout the book that there's this, this, and this. And you're like, well, maybe that's negating what he said earlier, but I thought that was interesting, and I was glad to see him say that.
I also wondered if he had any qualms about the way he organized the book in terms of there's no systematic approach to these processes. There's no like ready-made way, but here's some lists that I've looked at and things that might help you.
Right.
But I think at the end he kind of stepped back from that, and I read the last chapter again today, so that kind of helped me to really think about. But it's a book, so it has to have some kind of framework to go with.
Right.
In that way, but that he really focuses on it not being kind of a cookie cutter process like some other books you might look up.
Yeah, and that was one thing I was going to ask. We have, in thinking about this, you have the framework and the 5 chapters of the book. I guess the 2nd through 6th, is that correct? Let me double check real quickly. Yeah, 2 through 6 are those 5 components: the moral purpose, understanding change, relationship, knowledge creation, and coherence making. But then the 7th chapter, I think, is possibly the most important of the chapters, the tortoise and the hare.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious about what your guys' take on it. Should we focus more on the framework, or what I see as his kind of synthesis of the framework and implementation of the framework? This idea that you have to have leaders who are thoughtful and listen and make informed decisions rather than charging ahead. I don't know.
No, I would agree. And thanks for covering while I stepped away there to take care of the dog.
You're good.
Okay, just this.
Well,
I'm
asking that.
So 2 pages.
Yeah.
3/4 of it maybe should be just highlighting the framework, and then the last quarter of it, kind of his whole synthesis, pulling it all together.
That helps me. Okay.
And I guess we could be thinking about towards the end goal of the jigsaw is kind of creating that operational definition for leading organizational change. So maybe keeping that in mind as we come up with kind of our summary in the handout or something.
Good call. All right, so I took this off a little bit. We were talking about understanding change, right? The 3rd chapter.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other things in that chapter that also resonated with me, Kurt, you talked about not following the lists. Also, he has a section entitled "Appreciate the Implementation Dip,"
Mm-hmm.
which that goes back to the whole tortoise and the hare thing, that people that run out ahead try to outrun the implementation dip, I think, and those who are thoughtful understand that that's a reality and that's something you have to work through. And I think that's a key part to change in any organization. It's tough to deal with that dip, but it's a reality in those cases.
And I think that's what the states who are bailing out of Common Core right now, Indiana.
Yeah, sorry about that.
And who knows if Common Core is like a great idea or not? I think it is a great idea. Whether it was a great plan or not, who knows? But I mean, it's only been a couple of years, so it's hard to know. But I think that's a fantastic example of the implementation dip.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We used to deal with it all the time with when I would help implement new tech high schools, and districts get behind it because they want to see focus on other things than just test scores, right? So you implement a school. The first couple of years, it's a change in the way people teach, it's a change in the way students learn, and there is going to be a dip, and you see the test scores go down, and districts get very scared following that first set of test scores when they drop a little bit, and there are a couple of newspaper articles talking about the investment in this model and no return on investment, and realizing it takes a little while for that to really set in and it become the way you do things. And we've had a few schools that drop out pretty much immediately just because of the fact that it's tough to move through that piece. But all right.
All right. So, thinking about like our jigsaw groups.
Yep.
We're supposed to be done by not next week, but the week after, correct?
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay. Have your groups reached out to you?
No, I haven't talked to any of them yet.
Okay. Yeah, I think our group is meeting, not our group, but the jigsaw group mine is meeting on Wednesday.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, I mean, not that there's a rush. I think it isn't until next week, but many of us have things coming up this coming weekend, so we're trying to get done sooner than later.
Yeah, I think we're going to meet this week as well because people have a lot going on at the end of June.
It's probably not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea. Yeah. Happily, I'm headed to Ireland next, on Friday. That'll be a nice thing.
Wow, that's quick. I know you'd been talking about that.
Yeah, it'll be a good time. I took my wife and kids to the airport today, and they left. They're just getting, yeah, they're headed to London right now, leaving out of O'Hare. So, all right, well, let's just continue with the doc and shrink it down to 2 pages. I do like the graphic. I'll just find a way to make that smaller, I think. And then focus on, not focus, but give appropriate emphasis to the tortoise and the hare section.
Yeah. One other piece that I think we had to touch base on too, and it's not really talked a lot about in the book, but at the beginning, he mentioned something called the energy, enthusiasm, hopefulness constellation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was like present at the beginning of the book, but I didn't.
Yeah, but it's not really found throughout. But at the end of the chapter, he says the conclusion then is that leaders will increase their effectiveness if they continue to work on the 5 components of leadership. With energy, enthusiasm, and hopefulness. So the idea is that they have to focus on these ideas with this mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that may be something we want to include also, even though it's pretty vague. He doesn't really talk much more about it. But
no, I didn't think it was very research-based. Maybe that's why I didn't come back again. But
that's very possible.
Yeah, but I don't think you could argue with any of those descriptors.
Right.
And it is in that framework, so we should probably touch up on it. I didn't include it in the notes, though.
Okay.
Probably because of how little it was mentioned, I guess, now that I'm looking even through the book.
All right, sounds good. Okay, hold on just a second here. I'm going to stop the broadcast and we'll wrap up loose ends.